If I asked you to tell me the one question every quest exists to answer, could you tell me what that is? Because if you're trying to write a mythic story that feels hollow, no matter how big the stakes, it's because you don't yet understand what actually makes mythic storytelling resonate and endure. I've been a professional editor and TV story producer for over 13 years, and I've worked on all genres and many mixes between, helping novelists and screenwriters achieve professional milestones while working on hit TV dramas. And there are a few essential principles that make the difference between a generic quest and a mythic one, and key genre ingredients we need to get you cooking with so that your mythic story stands out where it counts. By the end of this video, you'll know what makes a story truly mythic, how the quest archetype gives it shape, and how to make your hero's journey emotionally powerful instead of mechanically cliche. But first, we need to answer what a myth actually is and why we all keep telling them. So what makes a story mythic? We all know that myths are often old stories and that most have gods and monsters. But the reason that's the case is myths exist to make a connection between the divine and the mundane, the immortal and the mortal, specifically through revealing how the actions we take in our lives can transcend a mortal lifetime. Because a myth is a story where everything matters and characters' actions echo into the future in some way, because myths are ultimately about immortality, or achieving a kind of immortality through the idea that our actions last. What the heroes are fighting about is bigger than survival. It's about achieving their destiny so they can leave a legacy. And for you, writing one means focusing on characters becoming something through the consequences of what your quest sets out. In The Lion King, Simba doesn't just defeat Scar, he restores a broken world and reclaims a legacy. So the stakes are inherently epic, but if you focus on big stakes or divine power alone, your story is going to feel like cosplay with all the soul of week-old roadkill. Myth works best when it's rooted in emotional truth. In The Green Knight, Gawain's mythic test isn't about whether he lives, it's about whether he's worthy to live within the chivalric paradigm, the knightly code of honour being all. But if you don't know what kind of mythic scale you're working with, you can't know what kind of legacy your character is chasing and what kind of consequences they should be stepping into. Consequences which you as the writer are going to have to deliver. So let's talk about the four major mythic types so you can identify yours. The heroic myth is where the individual's quest is to embody strength, courage, or some kind of virtue. Think Beowulf, Wonder Woman, or even Moana. Epic myths are larger scale tales of civilization, culture, and collapse, and these stories define what a people value or fear losing, like the Iliad, Dune, and Lord of the Rings. The apocalyptic myth is a story of judgment, endings, or transformation through destruction. This is myth delivered as prophecy. The Fall makes something new possible, like Noah's Ark, Children of Men, and even The Matrix. Then we have the cosmic myth, where humans brush up against powers far bigger than themselves, and the mythic comes from encountering that something that is unknowable, godlike, or divine, like 2001: A Space Odyssey, Arrival, or Annihilation. Each type asks a variation of the same question: who do we become when everything is at stake? So myths aren't specifically about gods, they're about what it takes for us to join them in what makes them godly. But myth isn't really a structure that you can effectively write to, and for that, we turn to the quest. The quest is how you put myth into tangible action from which meaning can be drawn. The trap is building an adventure but forgetting that it's supposed to be serving a transformation. And that's the same trap that a lot of fantasy writers have in creating a story and world that just comes to feel like a travelogue, giving a false sense of story momentum just by escalating the size of battles or the strengths of enemies without much of it meaning anything. So what defines a quest, and how do you make yours work? Like every story, a character or group sets out to achieve a specific goal. Maybe it's to find something, save someone, fulfill a prophecy, whatever you choose, but what matters most isn't the destination, it's how the journey changes them and what they have to become in order to succeed. Some stories have characters with flat arcs, meaning the character's traits are baked in and they don't really change. But in a mythic quest, the whole point is personal transformation, and that means crafting a transformative arc for your protagonist. And I've got a full course you can watch to do that, linked here. In a mythic quest, the protagonist wants something they're not yet ready to claim, and the world then tests them physically, emotionally, and spiritually. If they succeed without sacrifice, it wasn't a quest. If they return unchanged, it didn't deliver on the mythic promise. Think about Frodo in The Lord of the Rings. The goal is, of course, to destroy the ring, but carrying it and achieving that goal permanently changes him. Every step forward costs him something, and by the time he gets home, he's no longer the person who left. He achieved his internal desire and the goal of saving his homeland and world, but not for himself. He no longer fits in it. But when is the quest a genre and when is it just a framework for a plot? If the quest is the core identity of the story, if everything revolves around the journey, the obstacles, and what the character becomes through the process, then quest is your genre too. But sometimes the quest is just giving your story shape, it's not its core emotional drive. And that's when you're using the quest as a framework, a structural device to support another genre or blend. Mad Max Fury Road is structurally a quest, but emotionally and thematically it's blending the Western and action genres. Max doesn't fundamentally change himself, but the world and lives of others do. So ask yourself, is the journey why we're here, or just how I'm getting my characters where they're going? A quest becomes mythic when the road changes the traveler and their final actions at the final destination then come to change the world. And that brings us to the most misunderstood tool in storytelling. Writers cling to the hero's journey like a rabid badger in heat, and most use it as a checklist instead of a way to drive an emotional internal arc. So let's skip through the key stages quickly, beginning with the ordinary world. This is where the hero starts and where we often learn what they're avoiding doing or being. And this is because it establishes the emotional baseline, a version of themselves that no longer fits in the world they feel they've outgrown. The call to adventure is the world demanding something new from them, something they don't believe they're ready for that throws them into your plot. Then comes the refusal, or what we also call the debate phase, and this is a moment or sequence of hesitation and doubt, but also exposure. We often glimpse here the flaws that will come to define their internal struggle. Meeting the mentor is where they're offered a new worldview, a glimpse of what could be possible. But don't turn this into a lecture. The mentor doesn't have to be wise or even alive. Their crucial role is to spark movement so that we can cross the threshold into the world of risk and your story world in full. But again, this isn't just physical, it's emotional, because it's the first moment where there's no going back and it's clear the plot now involves them personally in some way. From here, your story and journey unfolds. Tests, allies, enemies. What matters isn't so much the sequence you choose to have, it's the theme that everything is building to ultimately inform. And again, that's all unpacked in my free video course, and if you're serious about writing something that stands out, then you need to watch that next. And then we come to the ordeal, a literal and or metaphorical death and rebirth moment that has to break something open, and this takes them into the reward. Not just a prize, usually some kind of truth, the insight they've earned by letting go of who they were at the start, and the return is where the mythic becomes meaningful. They come back embodying that change. And if you've done this right, we feel that change as something destined to outlive them. But through all of that, the key question you should pin somewhere visible and make sure your story answers is the one question mythic stories focus on. What must they give up to become who they need to be? The hero's journey works because it mirrors what real transformation feels like in life. Painful, uncertain, but necessary. And with that established, there's one more trap to avoid. Because if your journey feels like it could belong to any hero in any story and in any world, then it's not really unique. So how do we make your myth specific and personal? The mythic doesn't work unless it's emotionally intimate within that epic scale. The thing to understand that actually affects all writing is that the bigger and broader you make your story's stakes, the more emotional distance you're creating between those stakes and your reader's ability to relate to them and be emotionally moved. Think about it. None of us can know what it's like to save the world or see our planet blown up, but most of us can relate to feeling like an outsider or feeling lost, insecure, incomplete, or whatever you choose. So your reader or audience needs to believe that this journey, this trial, this transformation could only happen to this character in this world under these conditions. And that means grounding emotional impact in something they can relate to and understand while packaging it in something epic. And to do that, you need to start with your protagonist's wound. So watch this video to understand that in full. But basically, every great quest story begins with something unresolved within your protagonist. Something they feel is missing. It's not always trauma, but it is always something to do with feeling incomplete in some way. So begin by asking, what does your character believe about themselves that isn't true? And how can your character's journey through your quest and your myth challenge that belief? Allies and enemies should then pressure that belief. Yes, obviously they exist for your plot, but they should also try to either embody facets of your protagonist's internal struggle, or at least be used to prod and reflect the pain of that wound they're wrestling with. Got a character who's afraid of intimacy? Show them someone who thrives in it, or someone who weaponizes it. If they're obsessed with control, give them a world that resists it. In The Lord of the Rings, Frodo's deepest struggle isn't just against Sauron, it's against the part of himself that wants the ring and his belief that that heroes do things alone, and the burden is his to bear without help. Sam isn't just a loyal friend, he's the cure for Frodo's false belief, amplifying the core theme of the power of true companionship, which the climax reveals in action. Gollum is Frodo's shadow, the warning of what he could become if he doesn't change that belief and caves into temptation. So myths become powerful when they're intimate in their emotion, but vast in consequence. And if that is the kind of story that you want to write, then head next to my genre video deep dive into fantasy, where I explore how magic and meaning collide, or watch my genre blending video to learn how the most successful stories are made. And if you're still stuck spinning your wheels and serious about writing complex characters with emotionally powerful arcs, then you need to use my GPT linked in the description that I've made to help you do all of that in just minutes instead of months or years.